What's up, Cougar Nation, and welcome again aboard the Hype Train podcast. I am your host, Joe Wheat. That's at Joey27 on Twitter. As always, with my boys Hunter Miller and Trevor Levitt. It's fitting that we're recording this at 8 a.m. Because big news is coming to BYU on Saturday morning, is it not?
Big news or big noon? Big 8 a.m. Can it be big noon if it starts at like 7:30?
No, it can't, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to wake up early on a Wednesday morning and prepare myself for what's coming. Also, awesome stuff that's happened. Utah has a hockey club, and they are a wagon squad.
Full on hockey fever over here. It was going to take a lot to distract from the BYU football season that we've got going on. The bye week probably felt the perfect timing where I could spend all of last week and early this week prepping for the debut of the hockey club. Electric showing. Absolutely electric. Chandler, who's not on the podcast today, was there. Said the energy in the building was unreal. Translated to TV. A lot of the players afterwards said it was the loudest arena that they've played in, which isn't saying much when you consider that they came from a 4,000 seat college rink in Arizona, or their arena before that was a quarter of the way filled, but they obviously have played road games as well. So still, Utah stacks up, I think, against some of the best NHL arenas. So now it's just on the fans to bring that energy every night, right? Like, it's easy to do it when it's the inaugural first ever game for the franchise, but keep the energy going all season long, which if they keep playing the way they played last night, coming out with a 5-2 win, then I think that we'll see that energy every night. But yeah, awesome stuff.
It was one of those things where on Twitter, just seeing the amount of people that I follow and interact with, just be like, I didn't realize that hockey was like this fun. It's like, yes, like some of it, like living in Colorado, Hunter, obviously you have your Bruins and have been to games. Like hockey is such a fun sport, and it's one of the sports that like you watch at the arena itself, and it's just different, and it is so much fun. And the fact that like people that I care about, like friends that I have, get to now experience it and have a team to cheer for is like, this is cool. Like, this is a new chapter of the state of Utah and their sports, and I'm really grateful that things worked out the way that they did for the Coyotes to now be the hockey club, and maybe the Yeti eventually. But just to see my friends like discover hockey last night, I was like, this is awesome.
We even put out a tweet from the hype train that was like, hey, like, no podcast tonight because of the hockey club. And we had people responding, be like, yeah, that's fair. Like, we agree to these terms. Like, when BYU fans and the hype train listeners are willing to delay the podcast by, I guess it's more a delay of like 12 hours for the sake of the hockey club, you know that they're bought in, especially considering it's the week of Arizona, big noon kickoff coming to Provo, top 15 BYU football team. Like, there's a lot that's happened this week and a lot to kind of go over the next 40 or so minutes. But they were willing to wait because the hockey was so electric.
I'm going to spring this on you, Hunter. We did not prepare for this, but I want you to give me your top 5 moments/players from last night's win.
I mean, number one player has to be Connor Ingram, the goalie. He single-handedly, I think, kept Utah in the game in that third period. And to start the second period, Chicago came out to start the game pretty slow. Only had like 2 scoring opportunities and shots on net in the first period. And then they had 6 in the first 3 minutes of the second period. They had a lot of close chances in a 3-2 game in the third period. So Connor Ingram would be number one. Number 2 probably would be Dylan Gunther, who had 2 goals, including the first ever goal for the hockey club. 3,
so cool.
3, probably Clayton Keller, team captain. He's the one who had the one of the other goals and the second goal in the first period. 4 would probably be Lauri Markkanen doing the puck presentation while skating as a 7-foot NBA player. Is pretty awesome. And then number 5 would just be the hockey club fans for just the electricity. Every time Utah would do something or score a goal, they'd show a crowd shot and just a packed arena waving their white towels and being really, really loud and raucous. So those would be my top five.
I do have to say the blackout with the white towels was
Yeah.
just excellent choice. It looked like I don't even know how to describe it. It was like just something out of a movie, like some kind of like evil empire ice cave sort of deal. It just looked so cool. Much cooler than any other sport. Like honestly, it looked cooler than most sports atmospheres I've ever seen.
If they do go with Yeti, I think there's a lot of cool stuff that they could do arena wise to like the colors already match this, right? I think like the technical term is like rock black, salt white, and mountain blue. Like it kind of, and the blue is like kind of an icy blue. It all is cohesive to an ice cave kind of effect and feeling within the arena. I know a lot of like the branding on the broadcasts in the preseason was like ice cave themed. So if Utah does go with the Yeti next season, I think that it lends itself well to developing that kind of atmosphere inside the arena, which would be really, really cool.
Welcome to Hoth for all you Star Wars fans. But I did want to ask Hunter, because I like when I was watching the broadcast yesterday, like I watched enough hockey to be able to appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like very similar to when BYU's on offense, the stadium was really quiet. I just don't remember times where I could hear guys like calling for the ball, or excuse me, for the puck. Wow, we're all still adjusting to the hockey in Utah apparently. But like calling for the puck, was that like, it's normally a little louder than that, right? Was that just a crowd not sure what to do, or
probably a little bit of everything. It's, I think when your team is on offense and trying to score, you're going to be a little more quiet to help them focus. I think it's probably that. It's probably the fact that it's just a new sport. Fans don't, they don't know all the intricacies, ins and outs quite yet. And then the third would probably just be the anticipation. Like you see them get the puck into their zone and have scoring opportunities, and that anticipation and like waiting for a goal to happen. I think, it's that nervousness on the edge of your seat, just kind of waiting for something to happen so you can explode. And they certainly did their job in getting hyped every time they would score. I think that like first goal, like 2 seconds into the game, there was like a very loud, like, "Let's go Utah" chant, which like as a BYU podcast, we don't typically love those, but it was like super awesome to hear. We'll allow it in this case. It was super awesome
from what it normally means.
Exactly. There's now 3 things that could mean, right? With the Jazz and with the hockey club and with Utah. But like that came through super loud, like on the TV in the first couple of seconds, which was really, really cool to see. Like as soon as they did the puck drop and, they start the game, just immediately into chants and cheers and cheering. And it was really, really cool.
It's honestly amazing it took this long. Like Utah was born to have a hockey team.
I mean, Utah's a great hockey, like Utah's not a town, but it's like a great just sports town in general.
100%.
Like the Jazz obviously are always, even when they're bad, they get a decent enough attendance. Obviously not full when they're bad, but compared to other teams when they're bad, like the Utah Jazz outperform in ticket sales relative to team performance most of the time. BYU and Utah football obviously are always packed houses. BYU basketball, at least, and Utah State basketball are always really packed.
No. I'm going to push back on one of those teams.
Utah State? Utah State gets good.
No. Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought you said
State.
BYU and Utah, and I was like, I don't know about that.
No, I carefully worded it. BYU and Utah State basketball. Like, there's just so many teams. I think RSL, like I've only been to one RSL game. I'm not a soccer guy. But from my understanding, like they get pretty good attendance at every single one of their games. It's
even the Warriors rugby leads the league in attendance, don't they?
Yeah, they do. I don't know if they still do, but they at least were when I was there. I don't know.
If you didn't, it's because you stopped working there.
Yeah, exactly.
It has been an amazing, like, I can't remember a bye week that was this good. Like when they talk about winning the bye week, this is what they mean. The last week or so has felt like the end of a movie where against all odds, the hero comes out on top and all the bad guys go to jail. Like let's just kind of recap what's happened in the last week. BYU goes to 5-0. They're currently ranked 14th in the country. Big Noon Kickoff announces that they're coming to Provo. Meanwhile, just up the road, no one knows if Cam Rising is still alive. A cut on his finger where he was a game time decision 3 weeks ago has all of a sudden turned to, oh, he'll play when the doctors medically clear him. There might be a chance where we sit him down for the rest of the season. That whole thing is in shambles up the road. We got hockey in the state of Utah. We got Robert Saleh, enemy number one among BYU fans, was fired yesterday. It's just like,
and escorted out the building, by the way,
and escorted out like literally, it's a scene from a movie. My life is a movie, boys.
Adam Gase was not even escorted out the building, and he did almost irreparable damage to the Jets.
It's all coming up, Cougs.
I mean, and just upset, even when BYU wasn't playing, just like the perfect upset college football weekend where you were still.
Oh yeah, and that was the other great part is like BYU was elected not to play on the craziest weekend of college football of the year, which is great. I mean, granted, it was pumpkin patch weekend for most BYU husbands, so they probably didn't get to see a ton of it. But shout out to you guys for watching Alabama Vanderbilt while on the hayride.
I literally. Not a pumpkin patch, but literally like during the commercials leading up to The Wild Robot. Great movie, by the way. Great family movie. But I am in my seat on YouTube TV finishing Vanderbilt and Bama and watching their students tear down their goalposts before they eventually launched it into the river 3 miles away. So good little like opening. My previews was one of the biggest upsets in sports history before.
Oh, I think we talked about it a little bit. Hunter, I was still saying Michigan, Appalachian State. I think I've come around to your view that this might be the biggest upset in college football history because we know Alabama's good. Like we know that they just beat a top 5 Georgia team. They were number 1 in the country versus number 2, and Vanderbilt is Vanderbilt. I heard it said that like it's okay to lose to a rebuilding team, but it's not okay to lose to a team whose stadium is literally being rebuilt while you're playing the game.
Which Army is doing the same thing and they're undefeated. So maybe it's a good luck charm. I probably still Michigan Appalachian State is like the biggest upset in the last 20 years or whatever. My devil's advocate, well, think about this argument is the fact that Appalachian State was the FCS national champs that year. And I probably lean towards, at least historically in the last couple of decades, FCS national champs are usually better than Vanderbilt. And that while that Michigan team was ranked really, really high, it was obviously a preseason ranking because that was a week 1 upset. That Michigan team turned around, lost the next week, started the season 0-2. They kind of got their footing, but they ultimately finished like 9-4, like not a Alabama level talent team. So the tiebreaker for me is probably just like the form and fashion in which Appalachian State won. Like that was just insane with a blocked field goal. Also, the fact that it was at Michigan probably gives it that as the bigger upset. But I do think that there is a discussion worth having. You know, we probably won't have it, but people, if you're at your office, can have it. That this Vanderbilt over Alabama game may have been a bigger upset. I know there's bigger like point spread upsets. I think like Howard beating UNLV was bigger, but again, like does UNLV losing really constitute the biggest upset in college football, you know, of the last few decades? Like, no way. It's pretty crazy that a walk-on quarterback transfer from New Mexico State comes into Vanderbilt and beats Alabama for the first time since 1984. So it feels like 84 out there.
You guys look at the strength of record rankings recently?
I mean, it's hard not to.
Does a bear poop in the woods, Joe?
Trevor, you want to tell the people BYU's strength of record ranking?
Number 1, baby. The best.
We're 84 is back, boys. BYU's number 1. Stop the count. I don't care what happens the rest of the season. It's really, we talked about it a little bit last week. It's almost eerie, the similarities between this football season and last year's basketball season. Picked to finish 13th in the conference. Really low expectations. They come out of the gates firing. They beat the spread by 14 points every single week. And then not only that, they end up as the number one. Basketball is number one in net around this point in the basketball season. They're number one in strength of record at this point in the football season. I don't know. Again, I don't know what's going to happen the rest of the season. I'm in no way. Why not? Why not say BYU is the best team in the country? They have the best resume.
They are right now.
Only team with 2 ranked wins.
They also have the highest strength of schedule of all the undefeated teams. So it's not like BYU's winning because they played crap teams. Like, they have a harder strength of schedule than Ohio State or Texas, who are like other 5-0, 6-0 football teams.
So this is what makes me so excited about the rest of the season. Looking at the rest of the schedule, the best teams BYU have played are probably all behind them. Like, Kansas State is a legitimately good football team. SMU is a legitimately good football team. I wrote about it in my article, but so Kansas State and SMU, as good as BYU's defense has played, Kansas State, when not playing BYU, is 9th in the country in yards per play. SMU is 22nd in yards per play. BYU held them to 4.3 yards per play combined. Those are 2 really, really, really good offenses when they're not playing BYU, and BYU held both teams out of the end zone. Like that's. And then looking forward, BYU only plays one team in the top 40 of yards per play the rest of the season, and that's Arizona this weekend. And they haven't scored more than 23 points since week 1. So it's like there's hard not to feel a little hope. But I guess like it's a bye week. We don't have a game to review. We kind of wanted to take a look back at the season and give you guys kind of our recap, our takeaways from the first half of the season. Trevor, we'll start with you. What has been, I don't know if your biggest takeaway or your best moment? It's a rich tapestry. Take it for whatever you mean. What has been the best part of this 5-0 start?
Oh man. I think best moment's got to be just the entirety of the Kansas State game. Like, How to Train Your Dragon, like, you just gestured to all of me. That's what that game was like. Just the whole game was just insane. I think the biggest surprise, outside of obviously the entire team's success, is the dialogue around Jake Retzloff was so loud for so long. And just seeing him be, at least statistically, like a top 6 quarterback in the conference, like more than just a serviceable starter, like, is actually one of the reasons BYU was like winning football games, has been awesome. I think that obviously is a lot of credit to him, but I think it also, to me, is a good indication that Aaron Roderick, albeit he has his weaknesses, can still speak to quarterbacks. Like, that's something that he's still really good at. And so for Jake to be off to the kind of start that he is, for me, lends really well. Joe, you obviously mentioned the schedule and who we have left to play. Like, Jake's going to have a big time role in that. And he's shown against good defenses and good teams already this season that he's up to task. And so that to me has been the biggest surprise. But also BYU's been QBU since day one. So I guess I shouldn't be all that surprised, but it is nice to see Jake accept that mantle and carry it squarely on his shoulders so far.
It's funny. Like, Jake Retzloff would probably be mine. Just his ascension. Again, like, I'm not saying he's Heisman Trophy favorite or the best quarterback in the Big 12, but it's like, it's not that. He's been kind of playing like it. So the biggest thing for me is how loud we were in the offseason about A-Rod's handling of the quarterback room. I think that's probably been put to rest at this point. Like looking around college football, is there a single transfer quarterback that BYU had a shot with in the offseason that you would rather have right now than Jake Retzloff?
No.
Because like DJ Uyunglele, absolutely not. Like that was an option last year. Ty Thompson came from Oregon. He's not even the starting quarterback at Tulane. Malachi Nelson went to Boise State. Wouldn't rather have him than Jake Retzloff. Even Isaac Wilson. Granted, the future of Isaac Wilson, you can have your own argument there, but like this season of Isaac Wilson, if we're talking about him being the starting quarterback, I would rather have Jake Retzloff right now than Isaac Wilson. I'm forgetting some of the other quarterbacks that BYU looked at this offseason, but Jake Retzloff is pretty much
to your point, though.
Yeah, but like Jake Retzloff has pretty much outperformed all of them, and
the only one I would throw out there is Taylon Green at Arkansas.
Who
transferred from Boise, committed to Arkansas before he came on his visit to BYU.
What's his numbers been this year? I feel like he's been a pretty high volatility quarterback as well, but I might be.
Yeah, it's been a roller coaster, but I feel like Jake is also a roller coaster in his own right. Taylon Green's stats this season on Sports Reference. He is 56% completion, 1,500 yards, 5 touchdowns. He does have 5 picks.
So 5 touchdowns, 5 picks. Right now on PFF, he's rated, he has a 80 passing grade, which is just a couple spots above Jake Retzloff. So, I mean, maybe we call that a wash, but
you put him in BYU's offense, instead of Arkansas. Maybe he does a little better. He obviously has less passing touchdowns, but
right. But who knows? But I guess the idea here is that's a conversation. Like first week of the season, I would have said, yeah, Taylon Green over Jake Retzloff 100%. But now it's like an actual discussion. Sports Nation put this out yesterday on their show. I thought it was fascinating. Jake Retzloff has accounted for 19 total touchdowns in his first 9 starts. That is more than Jaron Hall, Zach Wilson, Tanner Mangum, Riley Nelson, and John Beck through their first 9 starts. Also more than Steve Sarkisian. He has fewer turnovers than Sarkisian, Beck, Hall in their first 9 starts. So it's like most of those guys turned into all-timers. At worst, they turned into serviceable guys. Like Riley Nelson kind of stands out there as a guy who wasn't an all-timer but was still a solid quarterback for BYU. Like if that's the floor, I think we're feeling pretty good about where Jake Retzloff has been. And the thing that makes me most
that's P4 competition too. Like
all against P4 competition.
Yeah.
And that is with like the worst 4-game start that we can remember from a BYU quarterback. He's been awesome this year. Like definitely exceeded expectations. He's been the best quarterback on the field in every game we've played this season. Granted, that some of that is because Jacob Robinson and company have been locked down and making other quarterbacks look like G5 starters or G5 backups. But he, like, again, looking at the rest of the schedule, he ranks ahead of every quarterback left on the schedule in touchdowns. He's ahead of every quarterback on the schedule in yards per attempt. He's ahead of every quarterback left on the schedule in quarterback rating. Like if a game the rest of the way comes down to who has the best quarterback, I feel pretty good about Jake Retzloff. And the only one that it's kind of a debate at this point is Noah Fafita this weekend. And Noah Fafita statistically has not been close to what Jake Retzloff has been.
Yeah, it's Fafita is an interesting one just because he had this like his insane freshman season. He's coming in as a sophomore, is having a little bit of a sophomore slump, but like you said, I think Jake is plenty serviceable and plenty up to the task to be able to handle that. Hunter, what about you, dude? Like, what stood out to you in this 5-0 undefeated start?
The run defense. Like we saw the probably a little bit of an exception against Baylor. They were able to move the ball up and down the field a little more, but even then, like, it wasn't on the ground. And this was a BYU fan base that all they wanted was to like put pressure on the quarterbacks and stop the run. And it seems like we've gotten both of those things in one offseason. So for me, it's just the defense again. Like, offense has been great. I think the biggest and nicest thing I could say about Jake is he hasn't put BYU in a position to lose games yet. Hasn't cost them games. But the defense, you know, we've talked about it a lot this season so far, where it's the defense that is going to put BYU in a position to win every single game. And then it's on the offense to just, you know, close that door and, you know, execute on it. And so far they've done exactly that, right? We talked about the, you know, yards per play. Joe brought up those stats. It's just watching SMU ever since that BYU game and not be able to reach the end zone, and their only points came off of field goals, and a lot of those field goals were like over 50-yard field goals, and then to turn around and score like 66 points against TCU, and then to, you know, just be on this offensive domination. You know, they won at Louisville this week. Their offense just looks unreal, which is what people expected from SMU coming into the season. And looking at that and saying the BYU defense held them outside of the end zone despite them starting multiple drives in BYU territory. The offense was abysmal that game, and the defense still was able to, you know, not single-handedly, but 95% single-handedly win them that football game. The defense is everything BYU fans have been asking for in a defense over the last, it feels like, decade plus, since, you know, the latter half of the Bronco years. And after Kyle Van Noy left, that's all BYU fans have wanted, and we've gotten it all. And it just seems like the perfect storm of a capable offense and an unreal defense has finally, you know, come to fruition in Provo, and we see the results on the field.
I think Jerem Jordan mentioned on BYU Sports Nation that the defense has only allowed 3 points off of turnovers so far this season. And I think that's been, like, you want to talk about like just being an eraser of mistakes. Like, you take so much pressure on the on the offense for, like, Jake can continue to be aggressive, like Aaron Roderick and those guys can continue to have, like, you know, just a really optimistic and aggressive mindset, because they know that even if something goes wrong, like, the defense is taking care of business on the other end. And I don't know if, like, just 3 points off of turnovers is really sustainable. Like, if you keep turning the ball over, like, eventually you're going to pay for it. But it at least gives you the peace of mind to know that as long as we play clean football and a mistake happens here or there, like, the defense is going to have our back. It's like just SMU in its entirety, like Mark Collins getting that interception with the little toe tap on the sideline, like Jacob Robinson falling on a fumble after, you know, Jennings' very poor decision to try and pitch it out. Like, they're like, last season we talked about this. I think, Hunter, you mentioned it during the offseason. Like, the defense was there, very opportunistic, but maybe the stats weren't there. But now the stats are there and they're still opportunistic, and it's leading to BYU just absolutely shutting teams down. And it's been one of the most exciting things to watch. And that's with an offense that's proven to be pretty explosive this season, despite our concerns coming in. So.
And it feels like each game is like a different hero.
Yeah.
Right. Like, it was Mark Collins against SMU. It was Crew Wakely against Baylor. It was Petrus against Kansas State. Like, each game, there's like a marquee moment, and it's a different guy. It's not, the defense isn't dependent on just Tyler Batty and Jacob Robinson like it has been in the past. There's, you know, even going back to the early 2010s, when it was dependent on, you know, Ansah and Van Noy. There's multiple players on this BYU defense that are stepping up in big time moments and making crucial plays and coming up with these, you know, whether you want to call them game saving moments. It's a different guy, which is, you know, incredible to watch.
Oh, it's what's kind of crazy to me is, like, I think this is probably the best defense BYU has had since that 2012 team that had Ziggy Ansah, that had Kyle Van Noy, that had Dan Sorensen. Like, that team was full of NFL guys. For reference, BYU right now averaging 4.2 yards per play defense. That is good enough for 8th in the country right now. In 2012, they allowed 4.3 yards per play, which was 6th in the country that season. Like, this has been that level of defense. And I think what's even crazier is the talent. I mean, we'll see what happens. Like, Jack Kelly, he's been in the middle of everything. He's a legit NFL guy. But, like, I don't think Tyler Batty is going to get drafted. Blake Mangelson's probably not going to get drafted. Banya's probably not going to get drafted. Like, who are the guys on this team that are going to be, 10-year NFL vets like Dan Sorensen and Ziggy and Kyle Van Noy were? I don't know the answer to that.
Jacob,
but Jacob Robinson.
Jacob Robinson.
Jacob Robinson.
And Jack Kelly.
Tanner Wall.
Tanner Wall. But this again, the defense just plays like such a cohesive unit. They just seem so well coached. And to your point, Hunter, like, that's what gives me the most hope and optimism the rest of the season. In order to compete for a Big 12 title, you have to have something that you do that's elite. And that thing for BYU is play defense. And it's both pass defense and rush defense. They're 4th in the country right now in defensive efficiency, according to FPI. Like, they are a championship level defense, and that's something that can carry BYU the rest of the season. If the offense can take a step forward. Oh, and by the way, LJ Martin is coming back this week. We haven't had, like, just imagine telling yourself that preseason. BYU is 5-0, ranked 14th in the country, and LJ Martin has 17 carries on the season.
Yeah, I was just thinking to myself, I'm like, BYU's done all of this without their best offensive weapon. And that, to me, is the craziest part of all of it. And not only without their best offensive weapon, but your starting running back, same hand in hand, best offensive weapon is your starting running back. But you also have done it without your backup running back. You've done it at times without your third string running back. They found ways to win. And we've talked about this in the past. Yeah, I think we talked about this last year with the BYU basketball team. Their greatest skill was just finding ways to win. And, we started off the BYU discussion today with the similarities between last year's BYU basketball team and this year's football team. That might be the biggest one, where it's the BYU basketball team was able to grind it out and, find different ways to win night in and night out. And the BYU football team has done the exact same thing, whether it's a defensive battle against SMU, whether it's a special teams punt return for a touchdown against Kansas State, whether it's a more of a shootout against Baylor where the offense needs to score 30 plus points. It's just different. Every game has been different basically to this point. And despite that, they've relied on the defense, obviously, is the one that's kept them in every single game and given them opportunities to win, like we've talked about. But they haven't had to rely on one thing being really, really good to win a game multiple times. They haven't had to rely on the arm of Jake Retzloff every week in and week out. They haven't had to rely on the ground game week in, week out. They haven't even had, as great as the defense has been and all the praise we give them, they haven't even had to rely on the defense week in and week out to win every single game. So that's the thing that's most encouraging to me is like, hey, they've shown that they can win in every phase. They've shown that they can win in basically every type of football game, whether it's a defensive battle or an offensive shootout. Like, that's something that BYU football historically, or at least in recent history, hasn't necessarily been able to do. It's been all reliant on, either the arm of Zach Wilson or the arm of Jaron Hall. It's been reliant on the legs of Tyler Algier. That's not necessarily the case this year.
And I almost like when I hear people say like, oh, this team just find ways to win, I kind of shudder a little bit, just because, like, on a national perspective and as a data nerd like I am, that's almost looked like as a bad thing in those circles. Like, the data nerds would rather have you have one thing that you can hang your hat on week in and week out. For some reason, that thing for BYU that's never mentioned is the defense. Like, people just hate college football teams that play good defense. It's just the way that it is. People would rather have you score 40 points a game and give up 25 than score 30 points a game and give up 15. It's just
no one likes Iowa. They like Oregon.
Well, the sickos committee likes Iowa, but that's it. But again, like I think again, people are still underestimating BYU because they underestimate defense. Like that just is what it is. But like even analytically, like BYU is 4th in the conference right now in net EPA per play. They're 2nd in the conference in net yards per play. Like analytically, this team is really good. Where I think last year this team was lucky to win in a lot of ways, took a lot of fluky things. Like, yes, you can call Kansas State, a lot of fluky things happened, but they also won that game by 30 points. Like this wasn't like an Arkansas type win or a Texas Tech type win. Like BYU kill them. Like they're eating the cats.
Is dominating on offense and defense and special teams a fluke?
I mean, no, but like Baylor, they've had a 20-point lead in all but one of their games this season. Like this team is good, y'all. And they have another chance to show that this week against Arizona. We'll kind of pivot now to that preview. Trevor, you tend to be our film junkie on this. I spent last night watching past highlights of BYU Arizona, going back and watching the 1080p versus highlights from 2007 to get myself hyped up for this game. But Trevor, what do you see from this Arizona team that either has you worried or doesn't have you worried?
Yeah, this game's going to have a lot of similarities to 2019 USC. You've got a quarterback that's really good, pro potential. People are talking about and buzzing about Noah Fifita. You've got a pro caliber, like going to be playing at a high level, like caliber receiver. It was Pittman back in 2019. It's Tedoroya McMillan now. The dude's special, like 6'5", runs like a deer. And then you've got a serviceable running back in Quali Conley. Very similar kickoff times, like 1:30 versus 2 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. I don't know if Arizona is quite as deep on offense as USC was. They obviously also had like Drake London on that team. That team was stacked, but very, very similar game. It's also very similar in the fact that Kalani has a lot of implications riding into this game. Against USC, it was, can he win big games? Can he beat the Power 5 opponents? And he obviously answered that question. Now it's, can he do what most baseball teams in the major leagues want to do? And can he win October? Because right now he's 4-8 in the last 3 seasons in October, including in 2022, not winning a single game in October. They went 0-4. And so if we're going to buck the Vampire Cougs, kind of issue that we've been having by beating Baylor. Like if you want to have a special season, you have to overcome and do things that you've never done before. And in this case, it's winning October. Arizona likes to push the ball down the field, but they're not unstoppable, especially with McMillan. He had 6 receptions for like 50 yards against Utah. He wasn't the reason Utah lost. I put a lot of that on Utah's offense being completely unable to move the football. So for me, very similar game to USC. I think the crowd's going to play a big role in this. Arizona's got a good offense, but we just spent all this time talking about the defense, and I think the defense is plenty ready. They had an entire bye week to be able to prep. A lot of the players, like listening to Mark Collins, listening to Keelan Marion, like they're all locked in and treated the bye week as it's meant to be, which is to have extra prep rather than just, sitting on our hands. This Arizona offense is really good. The defense is missing their 2 best corners. So I think that the offense can move the football. We just can't let McMillan get loose. And honestly, we just can't let Noah Fifita play backyard football because that's when he's at his best. So you're going to see a lot of contain. But this is definitely a game that I feel pretty good about. And it's a game that honestly, as long as I shouldn't say as long as BYU shows up, because that's not actually quite enough. But as long as BYU continues to play at the level of football they played in the first 5 weeks, I don't see why BYU isn't 6-0 and bowl eligible after this game.
I'm with you. This is a very winnable game for BYU. Like, Arizona is a good team that can absolutely beat BYU. There's some things that are going against Arizona, starting with their two, their, I can't remember their names off the top of my head, Stukes and Nate sent it in the group chat. They're missing two of their best defensive players in this game. Both might be out for the year with ACL tears, which is devastating. Traden Dukes and Gunnar Maldonado, great players. They do have two really good corners, including the one that terrorized Isaac Wilson for large chunks of that Utah game. The defense, like, it was weird. Like, watching Arizona week 1 against New Mexico, they were exactly what I thought they'd be. Like, they averaged 11 yards per play on offense and gave up almost 6 yards per play to New Mexico's offense, which isn't great. I was expecting them to be a high flying offense. Ever since, they haven't scored more than 23 points in a game since. In terms of yards per play, since that New Mexico game, they're averaging about 5.5 yards per play, which is around what BYU's offense has been this season. Like, this isn't an offense that's unbeatable. Like, Noah Fafita has shown that he is going to turn the football over at different stretches. I think he's at 7 touchdowns, 6 interceptions for the year. He just hasn't been what we thought he'd be. I think a lot of that is because Arizona's receivers aren't very deep. You got Titaro McMillan, who's an absolute baller, but like, you can bracket coverage him the entire game and pretty much take him out of a game entirely, as has kind of been the case for the last 4 weeks. So, like, on offense, like, I think BYU's defense, I really like the matchups there. Arizona isn't amazing at running the football. On offense, like, I think this is going to be a really good shot for BYU. Again, Arizona, not to go full yards per play, but like, Arizona's yards per play on defense since that New Mexico game is 5.6 yards per play, which would rank, as I filter this list, around 60th. Sorry, wrong list. 5.6 yards per play would rank about 60th in the country. So not great on defense either. Like, am I crazy for thinking BYU can win this game by 2 possessions?
I don't think so at all. I think, like, the defense has the capability. Now, if we see the Baylor defense where they struggle covering guys, then no. Like, we're going to be in a much closer game than that. But after the bye week, players getting back healthy, Evan Johnson, Harrison Taggart, those guys, it's doable.
And the funny thing is, like, we talk about Baylor coming out and throwing the football all over the field against BYU. Their quarterback had under a 55% completion percentage. It's not like they connected on some big chunk plays, but it's not like BYU's pass defense was like completely ineffective in that game. Jake Retzloff still ended up with the higher quarterback rating of the two. And the other thing is, like, they expected Baylor to come out and run the football, and they came out and threw it 50 times. And then BYU started clamping down later in the second half. I think we know what Arizona is on offense. I think Noah Fafita is going to try and throw it into triple coverage to Titaro McMillan at least 12 times. They're going to force feed him the football, and there's going to be opportunities there for him to make mistakes. I don't know, Hunter, like, am I crazy for thinking that this can be a big win for BYU?
No, I don't. I mean, first of all, a big win for BYU is a statement that never can be deemed crazy on this podcast. Second of all, you talk about their offensive, at least their scoring struggles. They've been able to move the ball. Everyone talks about the passing game for Arizona, and rightfully so. I mean, Fafita and McMillan are a dynamic duo in the Big 12 and as well as nationally. Their stats are kind of all over the place when you look at how it translates to wins and losses. Kind of under the radar, their one consistent is that in their 3 wins, they had over 150 rushing yards and over 4 yards per carry, and their 2 losses under 150 rushing yards and under 4 yards per carry. Now you're coming into a BYU defense that's allowing 120 rushing yards per game and under, I think, let me get the exact number here, but 3.7 yards per carry. And majority of those yards and carries are coming from quarterbacks. So I do think that the BYU
And that's against
defense,
two really good rush offenses too, with SMU and Kansas State on that list.
Yep. And then, they were essentially letting the Wyoming quarterback run wherever he wanted. They said, we'll let you run all day. We're just not going to let you throw over the top of us. So I think that plays really well into BYU's hands. I think the fact that Arizona hasn't gone a single game this season without a turnover plays really well into BYU's hands. So I just think the matchups you talked about, Joe, for Arizona's offense versus the BYU defense, and you factor in that Jay Hill's had an additional week to prepare for Fafita and McMillan in this Arizona offense, only plays into BYU's favor. My one pause is like we saw BYU after the bye week last year against TCU when they got off to a hot start, went on to a bye week, and then came back and didn't even bring the right cleats to the stadium. I'm trusting that this coaching staff is not going to let that happen again, though.
Yeah, it's the thing that's so nice about this defense, Hunter, is like, you are obviously like between your time with Ben Criddle and the radio work, like your ability to like see stats and connect and correlate different things is obviously top tier. But it's so nice to know
give me
that
too much credit.
Not enough, to be honest. But you connect that and you see that like kind of just like right here as we're talking. I guarantee Jay Hill probably noticed that in the first 10 minutes, going into the bye week. And that's going to be something that they harped on. A lot of like Utah's struggles with stopping Arizona when they were moving the football was Arizona running a lot of counter. And that's going to be something that Jay Hill's going to take notice of. I think, honestly, in this game, the players to watch on defense, it isn't going to be Jacob Robinson or like Tanner Wall or whoever's over the top on McMillan's side, because I think you do. I think you bracket him on every play. The guys that are going to make this game really difficult for Arizona is going to be the backside corners that are probably going to be playing a lot of one-on-one with their receivers, and then the defensive line making sure that they don't get pushed around when they are running counter or when they are trying to, get those big outside runs in zone. So that for me is like kind of the who to watch of this game. And they've been good. I mean, we've got Maury Bamba, who's going to be naturally healthier after that Baylor game, having a week off, more time away from that injury that he had to deal with at the beginning of the season. And you get Evan Johnson back. So things are looking really, really good for this defense coming back healthier. And then, like we mentioned before, like I still don't think we've talked about it enough, and we don't have time to talk about it, which is fine. But like LJ Martin as well is going to make this game, at least should on paper, a lot more interesting for this BYU offense as well.
Predictions. Yeah.
I'm gonna say again, I'm buying all the way in, man. I am so bought into this football team. I am gonna say 31-17. Again, I think that there's gonna be some opportunities in order for BYU to score 30 points this season, and they've done it in every game. There needs to be some opportunities in some short fields. I think Arizona has a tendency to give opposing offenses that. They did against Texas Tech last week. I think BYU's offense it's going to happen at some point. They're going to turn a corner. I think LJ Martin coming back. Like, I think this is going to be a good offensive showing. And then again, I don't trust Arizona's offense to be amazing week in and week out. I think there's the clear things that BYU can do to limit Arizona's offense. So I'm going to say 31-17.
I like
yeah,
it.
I'm gonna go 31-23. That's gonna be my 31-24. Let's do that. 31-24. I think similar to Vegas back in 2021, like this game's going to end up feeling a lot maybe closer than it actually was. McMillan is probably going to get his. I mean, that's something that they focus on clearly every week. If he doesn't, it's Jay Hill is just Batman, and that's something that he's just proven every week up to this point. And I'm gonna go with we're gonna put LJ back on the board. I think LJ scores a touchdown this week and has over. We're gonna go 75 yards rushing again. Just in his week, I don't think he gets a ton of carries. Just being freshly back, but I do think he scores, and I think he's over 75.
I like it. Score-wise, I'm probably going to split the difference and say, give me 27-17. I just think, BYU, like Arizona hasn't scored more than 23 points since that New Mexico game, but they've also still been winning majority of those games, right? So that their defense, for what it's worth, is actually doing a pretty good job of not giving up a ton of points. And I just think that BYU offense, we'll see how effective the running game is with LJ and these guys coming back. Is it something that's going to make a big difference? Or are they going to have to rely on the defense to give them short fields and everything like that? But I'm going to say that BYU just gets, 3 touchdowns and a couple field goals. Maybe one of those touchdowns is set up by the defense or scored by the defense. My hot take, Arizona is 7th in the country in sack percentage allowed. They're only giving up sacks 1.7% of dropbacks against FBS teams. They've only given up, I think, 3 sacks on the season, 2 to Texas Tech last week, and then 1, I believe, to Kansas State. My hot take, though, is that BYU is going to double that percentage this week, and they're going to get three sacks. Between Blake Mangelson, Jack Kelly, and Tyler Batty, they're going to come away with 3 sacks.
Love it. I didn't give my hot take. I'm going to say I'm going to take BYU's offense over 425 yards of total offense for the first time against a Power 4 opponent this season. I think this is a big opportunity, I think, for BYU's offense. Trevor, we need to highlight you for a quick second. I know we're coming up on time. What is your hot take record this year?
Well, it depends on how deep you want to go. Every person I've picked to score, or like I had the defense with 2 turnovers, and then I had Jake Retzloff turnover less against Kansas State. I'm 5-0. I'm mirroring the team in its entirety.
That's all you have to say.
Yeah, yards have been a little hit and miss.
Well, we don't talk about that.
All that matters is scoring. Yeah, guys, it's that kind of season, man. It's that movie where things are coming up all BYU and everyone else is going to jail. Trevor is 5-0 on hot takes this year. It's time to buy into the hype.
Do your damn in the end zone, LJ. That's all I'm saying, man.
First time since 1984 for that one too.
Feels like 84.
Go Cougs.
Cougs by a billion, as always.